Ethan Parker never expected his late-night drive home from work to change his life forever. A single dad juggling 2 jobs and raising his 7-year-old son, he was used to exhaustion. But that night, as rain poured down in cold sheets, something on the side of the road caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a bundle of rags. But as his headlights swept closer, his heart stopped. It was a child. A little girl, no older than 5, sitting barefoot in the mud, shivering under the storm. Ethan slammed on the brakes, his instincts kicking in. Throwing off his jacket, he rushed to her side. "Sweetheart, are you okay? Where's your mom and dad?" he asked, voice trembling. The girl looked up, her eyes wide with fear and something else, an emptiness too heavy for her tiny frame. She didn't answer, only clung tightly to his arm as if he were the first safe thing she'd seen in a long time. Without hesitation, Ethan carried her to his truck, wrapping her in his jacket. His mind raced. Who could leave a child out here? Was someone looking for her? But before he could say another word, the little girl whispered something that made his throat tighten and his eyes sting with tears. She pressed her tiny lips close to his ear and said, "Please don't leave me. Daddy." Ethan froze. In that one fragile plea, he knew his life had just changed forever. Ethan gripped the steering wheel with one hand, the other resting protectively on the little girl wrapped in his jacket. His son, Jacob, stirred in the back seat, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Dad? Who's that?" Jacob asked, peering curiously at the stranger sitting beside him. Ethan hesitated. He didn't even know her name. But he couldn't ignore the way she clung to him, trembling like a bird caught in the rain. "She's a friend," he said softly. "She needs our help." The girl pressed her face into his chest. "Please don't take me back," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ethan's stomach knotted. Back? Back where? Who would abandon a child on a deserted road in the middle of the night? He tried asking her again, but every question only made her shake harder. Finally, he decided, she needed warmth, food, safety. Answers could wait. At home, he laid out blankets by the heater, offering her soup and crackers. Jacob sat cross-legged across from her, watching. "What's your name?" he asked kindly. For the first time, the girl lifted her head. "Lila," she said, so quietly Ethan almost missed it. "Lila," Ethan repeated gently, testing the name. "That's beautiful." But the next words out of her mouth nearly broke him. "I was told nobody wants me, that I don't deserve a family." Ethan froze. His chest ached at the weight of her confession. He reached over, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. "That's not true, Lila." "Not at all," he said, his voice firm. In that moment, Ethan knew, he hadn't just found a child on the road. He had been given a chance to rewrite the ending of her story. The next morning, Ethan barely slept. Between checking on Lila and replaying her whispered words in his mind, he knew he couldn't ignore reality. A child found alone on the roadside wasn't just a personal matter, it was something authorities would want answers to. But the thought of Lila being taken away after what she had confessed twisted his gut. Over breakfast, Jacob chattered about cartoons while Lila sat quietly, spooning oatmeal but hardly eating. Every time Ethan caught her gaze, she looked away, afraid he might change his mind about keeping her there. Finally, he picked up the phone and called the local police. His voice wavered as he explained the situation. Within an hour, a patrol car pulled up outside his modest home. "Mr. Parker," the officer greeted, notebook in hand. "You found her on County Road 9? Alone?" "Yes, sir," Ethan said firmly. No one else was around. She was freezing. The officer crouched in front of Lila. "Sweetheart, do you know where your parents are?" Lila's lip trembled. She shook her head, clutching Ethan's arm tightly. "Sometimes kids run off." "Sometimes," the officer's voice trailed, his eyes heavy. We'll file a report, but she may need to be placed in temporary care. The word temporary rang like a warning bell in Ethan's ears. Lila's grip on him only tightened, her small voice breaking the silence. I don't want to go. Ethan's chest burned. He glanced at the officer, then back at Lila. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just about doing the right thing, this was about fighting for a little girl who believed she was unwanted. And Ethan wasn't about to let her down. The following days were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and tense visits from social workers. Ethan felt like every part of his life was being examined under a magnifying glass. Mr. Parker, one caseworker said briskly, flipping through forms at his kitchen table, you're a single parent with limited income. Adding another child, especially one with trauma, may not be realistic. Ethan's jaw clenched. With all due respect, realistic or not, she's safe here. That little girl was left on the side of the road. She deserves more than temporary care. She deserves love. Behind him, Jacob and Lila were sprawled on the living room floor, coloring side by side. Jacob leaned over and whispered something that made Lila giggle, a sound Ethan hadn't heard from her before. It filled the room with a warmth that no official report could capture. Later that night, after Jacob had fallen asleep, Lila sat on the couch beside Ethan. She held out a picture she'd drawn, a stick figure of herself holding hands with Ethan and Jacob under a crooked sun. At the top, in shaky letters, she had written one word, family. Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes blurring. That's exactly what we are, Lila, he whispered. But the fight wasn't over. The system wanted proof he could provide, proof he was capable. Ethan knew the odds weren't in his favor, but he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. He hadn't chosen this moment. It had chosen him. And he wasn't about to let bureaucracy decide Lila's future. Weeks passed, filled with interviews, background checks, and endless waiting. Ethan often wondered if the system would see what he saw every day, the way Lila's eyes lit up when Jacob shared his toys, or how she slept soundly for the first time in years because she finally felt safe. One rainy afternoon, the knock at his door nearly stopped his heart. It was the caseworker, folder in hand, expression unreadable. Ethan braced himself, Lila clutching his arm like she had the night he found her. Mr. Parker, the woman began, we've reviewed your situation extensively. Normally, cases like this take much longer. But after careful consideration, and hearing from your son, who had a lot to say about his new sister, we've reached a decision. Ethan held his breath. The caseworker smiled softly. Lila can stay. You've been approved for foster care with intent to adopt. Lila gasped, her tiny hands flying to her mouth. Does that mean I'm not going away? Ethan dropped to one knee, pulling her into his arms. No, sweetheart. You're home. For good. For the first time since he'd met her, Lila cried, not out of fear, but relief. Jacob wrapped his arms around them both, grinning ear to ear. That night, as the storm cleared, Ethan tucked both children into bed. Lila whispered again, but this time her words didn't make him cry, they made him smile. Thank you for choosing me. Ethan kissed her forehead. No, Lila. Thank you for choosing us. In that quiet moment, Ethan realized something profound. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes, it's about love strong enough to rewrite the story of a broken heart. And together, they were no longer broken, they were whole.